Good morning and welcome to warrenthornton.com. You can see us Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. You can also sign up to our free newsletter. I am joined by my wonderful co-host, Lee Slaughter. And of course, it is the morning after the night before. Let's go through some results for you. So
I think I would refer to it as the morning after the night of the long knives.
Let's go through it. So 632 MPs are now will be ensconced in the Houses of Parliament out of 650 declared. Labour have 407 seats, Conservative 115, Liberal Democrat 68, SNP 8, Sinn Féin 7, Reform 4, Green 4, Plaid Cymru 4, DUP 4, SDLP 2, Alliance 1, UUP 1, and other 7. Now, the turnout is just over 50%, so it is one of the lowest turnout since 2005. So let's go through some of the big names, and then Lee and I will get stuck into the bones of it. Let's go through some of the big names. Andrew Bridgen, in an absolute disaster, did not get enough votes. The independent that they told me was doing, they told me that Andrew Bridgen was doing well. Turned out it was Leicester South, not Leicester Northwest, where the independent overthrew the Labour and got a 40% swing. 40% swing. Alex Chalk has gone. George Galloway has gone. Penny Mordaunt has gone. And just now, in the last 15 minutes, Liz Truss has gone. We've lost well over 10 members of the cabinet. People who had a good night, very, very obviously for Starmer, but not such a good night because he got 7,000 less votes than last time. And that's because a gentleman who was standing solely on a Gaza ticket took 7,000 votes off. Nigel Farage and Richard Tice, obviously of Reform, came flying in. Braverman kept her seat, which was quite amazing. And we're looking at a Labour government. Lee, let's go through some of these people. Grant Shapps, I saved him till last. We don't have to put up the little Shapsy anymore. He got beaten.
Well, yes, he did. And Grant Shapps he got what he deserved, basically. He's a fool. He's a warmonger. But the size of the Labour victory is hugely, massively dangerous. They are full of left-wing lunatics. Yeah, I mean, from the now Foreign Secretary through to the Defence Secretary, or previously opposite, they are going to run real fast. The left wing of this bird is going to carry the bird all the way down the path between now and 2029. I've no fear for the country.
Let's go. I do massively. Let me state, got no love for the Conservatives, even less for this lot. I think it's going to be. We're going to absolutely go down the path of absolute destruction. Keir Starmer is going to be the Prime Minister. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister. Wes Streeting is going to be the Health Minister. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, and David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary.
He's foreign.
So let's go through it. We've got Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. He is a WEF-anointed boy, isn't he, Lee?
Yes. He went to Davos in January, announced he could do business there, basically preferred it to Westminster. The media have swung in behind him, and for 6 months, he has just been the golden boy. I mean, he is as wooden and as boring as they come. He's been undermining British democracy since his entire professional career, and now he's got the keys to number 10.
It is quite terrifying that David Lammy would be the Foreign Secretary. I mean, this is a guy who, when BLM was on, was about the most racist guy on the planet. We're looking at Wes Streeting, who is in favour of vaccines and in favour of the World Health Organization treaty.
Yep.
Let's sink in.
And bear in mind, the Tories signed up to that anyway. So with Wes Streeting in there, there will be, they're going to lock down again. There's going to be bird flu. They're going to lock down, and it's going to be really hard this time. Boris at least did it reluctantly and dragged his feet, and there was no, police were not let off their lead fully. But with this lot, it's going to be brutal. It's going to be dingbats time.
So he has turned around and said he is looking forward to, in his acceptance speech, looking forward to working with Anthony Blinken and Joe Biden.
What did I tell you before? This is the UK's Biden. It's going to be the end of the country.
Yvette Cooper, the Home...
You watch mass immigration as well now.
Just coming to that, Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, not only massive fan of LGBTQ in schools, also a massive fan of immigration. And of course, Angela Rayner has turned around and said that we've got to accept another 1.6 million, and they're going to be building another 64,000 homes for immigrants on Greenbelt land. This is about as big a disaster. Let's go through some of the key issues. So your tax is going to go up, Lee.
Yes, they'll start with council. Council tax will start being ratcheted up now. I think they'll do VAT, even though they've said they won't. I think income taxes will go up. They'll start with the upper band. They'll probably at least freeze the thresholds on all of the other taxes, like inheritance tax and the like. And I wouldn't be surprised if they increased national insurance as well.
Yeah,
they will increase taxes on working people, but their definition of working people is anyone in work that's got less than £1,000 of savings. So anybody with an ISA is going to get clobbered. Anybody with £1,000 plus in the bank is going to get clobbered. You know, their definition. This is a globalist government.
Yes, without a shadow of a doubt. And let me just put this to you here. I was up till 4 o'clock this morning, Lee, watching the results. I've had a couple of hours sleep, and we've jumped online to do a show about this. Let me say this straight away. I was watching the ITV coverage, and for 2.5 hours, while they were all talking, oh, this is a reform vote, it's all to do with Brexit, they avoided the one subject that was absolutely key in this election and why Reform did so well, and that was immigration. Now, the moment a Reform candidate brought it up, the host went, that's a discussion for another time, and steered it away from the topic. And all that time they were saying, because of Brexit, Reform is slightly racist, blah, blah, blah. And they were coming out with all this, and they were steering the conversation to Labour. Keir Starmer's going to do this. It's going to be this, is that, and the other. They did not mention immigration once before or after that. And that was a key issue for so many people voting Reform, Lee.
Yep. Well, because, again, big picture time. Step away. What we've not had an election here. We've had a baton handover from the right wing of the bird to the left wing of the bird. Both wings of the bird, both wings are attached to a bird, which is a World Economic Forum, United Nations bird. And they're going to run down this path now. And with a 200-seat majority, there's nothing to stop Starmer doing what he's promised to do in Davos, which is flood the country. And bear in mind what I've said previously, the United Nations population replacement agenda is about flooding Europe with 850 million immigrants from the Middle East and Africa and elsewhere. So with this government in place, the media refusing to even mention immigration as a major election issue, that tells you all you need to know. This is the end of the country. And if you think then back to the United Nations agenda for the 21st century, of which we're in Agenda 2030, then by 2029, there will be no country left to save.
I mean, the other thing about that, with the majority they've got, Lee, even if they do really badly, they've got a mandate now for 10 years, haven't they? Yeah. The 200-seat majority is not going to disappear on the first election.
I think we've had a strange election now. The next one, if there isn't, and I'll get back to the if in a minute, but if there is another election in 2029, then I think they're going to get wiped out because of what they're going to do to the country. Unless they can get all of the immigrants that they're going to bring in passported up and on the electoral roll, then they're going to get decimated. But let's just talk about the immigration to this point. If you look at the official numbers, since 1997, the Tony Blair government, 12 million migrants have arrived in the country, officially. That's not including illegals, which is another 500,000. So we've got 12 million who've been here for now on 30 years, 27 years. There is at least 8 million children been born to those people. That's 20 million. Yet we still talk about a UK population of around 60, 67 million. Well, if it was 62, 63, 64 million in 1995, 96, 97 census period, plus 20 million, not including the illegals in the last couple of years, then there's at least 80 million people in this country.
Yeah,
that's just basic mathematics. So
that was the one thing, Lee, that was probably the bright spot, was the fact that reform. We've talked about the Labour now. We've talked about Labour, and I'm along with you. I think it's going to be an utter disaster. These are so. David, as I said, those people that I've mentioned in those positions. Oh my God! Could you get any worse? This is money for wars. This is all the WEF agenda, Green Deal. I mean, you name it. Immigration.
Yep.
He's going to
that's another tax they're going to increase. They're going to increase the green levy on fuel.
Yes.
I think that'll go to 50% rather than the 25%.
Let's talk now about some of the other parties. Ed Davey, the Lib Dems have got 68 seats. He came out and was talking about being a carer and talking about getting the NHS back on its feet and everything else. That seemed to strike a chord with voters because they ended up with 60 odd seats, Lee, including Ed Davey. Who
I can only conclude that on 12% of the vote, they got in 12% of the vote cast out of just over 50% cast. I can only imagine their vote held up and the Conservative vote collapsed and they won seats by default rather than by policy.
Oh, the Conservative vote completely collapsed. They're 23.6%.
What I mean is in those specific seats that the Liberal Democrats are strong in. I think the Conservative vote collapsed there and the Liberal Democrat vote just held up. I don't think there's any enthusiasm for the Liberal Democrats. There's no real enthusiasm for Labour. This is a vote against the Conservatives, not a vote for Labour.
Yes, absolutely.
209 seats is majority is so dangerous.
Yes, and to be fair, Reform got more votes than the Lib Dems did, and of course they were trying to avoid the immigration thing all night long. The Lib Dems are sort of buoyed by it because Ed Davey is apparently a decent bloke, and the NHS sort of struck a chord, including his own, because he's a carer, he looks after a disabled.
The British public has got to break this infatuation with the NHS. The NHS does not work anymore. It is not what was designed, and it is not what everybody thinks it is. If anything, it's a death cult. And
yes.
If it's also catering, it's not a national health service anymore. It's an international, global health service, because anybody that can get off a plane can walk straight in and get free healthcare, which we have to pay for, which is why its budget has ballooned to 130 billion pounds a year, and still can't do anything. Can't deliver anything. The only people on the waiting list are you and me.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
Conservatives have just gone up to 117, and Liberal Democrats have just gone up to 69.
So the
Labour up to 408. That's a 209 seat majority now.
Yeah. That's the Lib Dems dealt with. They've done far better than expected. Reform are the true winners. They came second in a lot of the places that they're in. We have Farage in Clacton. We've also got Tyson in Boston, and a couple of others that are sort of on the coastal areas. This isn't surprising, is it? Because the coastal areas are where they put most of the immigrants to start with.
Well, not only that, there are a lot of these coastal towns have just been completely neglected by both Labour for 50 years and the Tories for the last 20 years. So it's a deprivation issue over there, plus immigration. And I'm disappointed with Reform only getting 4. I was hoping the Red Wall seat.
Over 4 million votes.
I remember with UKIP, we got 4.5 million votes. We got more votes than the Liberal Democrats, the SNP, Sinn Féin, the Greens, Plaid Cymru, DUP, SDLP and UUP combined and still only got one seat, which was the Clacton seat, which was really a Tory seat because he went back to the Tories almost straight afterwards.
Let's talk about the three losers.
Well, I think one thing we should note here is that they've, for all throughout this election, the Conservatives and the media have talked about, if you vote Reform, you'll get Labour. I think we should be talking about, if you vote Conservative, you've got Labour.
Yes.
Everybody should have backed Reform.
You've got exactly the same thing as the Conservatives, but only it's just going to get there faster. Let's talk about the Conservatives now. The Conservatives' vote has utterly and totally collapsed. It's been a bloodletting. I managed to get not only a straight line, but a diagonal as well on my ministerial bingo. Who's going to lose their seat? On my Tory wipeout bingo. We've had obviously Shapps is gone, which I'm hugely glad about. Braverman survived. Mordaunt is gone, which I am unbelievably happy about. He's not even shown his face, and the Conservatives. Is there any way back for them after this?
There's always a way back when you're an incumbent.
Become the party they look for.
There's always a way back for an incumbent party with a history like this, and you can look to Canada for that. You know, the Conservatives were wiped out there down to like 6 or 7 seats, and they managed to come back. The difference here, I feel, is this is a bigger economy. I think there is such disillusion that the level of immigration in the country, like I say, there's at least 25% of the population is immigrant now, plus whatever the crossover is.
And in the cities, of course, it's much.
And in the cities where the big constituencies are, there's a huge immigrant vote now, and that's going to be very difficult to shift. One of the things that we need to think about before we get to the Conservatives recovering is the Yuval Noah Harari factor, which I touched on.
Yeah,
he's saying that by this will be the last elections where human beings make decisions or vote, because AI will be able to understand what you think and understand what you want and predict what the outcome should be, and therefore you don't need to vote again. So I think that's something that needs to be put on the board, because I don't think the public or the media really understand how sinister that is. And so when we look at the ministers that have lost and the Tories recovering, yes, it's possible, but there are new factors at play now from when the Canadian Conservatives collapsed and rebuilt.
I lost my thread there. I was about to come in with something and it's gone completely out of my head.
Sorry about that.
Right. Sorry. Yes. SNP, a complete wipeout, and they've lost tons of seats.
Well, they're up to 8 from the 7 when we started. So they've won one more. So they've lost 40 because they had 48 seats.
40 seats. So let's examine that for a second, because Jimmy Cranky was on the ITV, obviously, doing her thing and saying that Scotland should have another vote for independence. The only chance there was ever another vote for a referendum on Scotland was if Labour needed the Scottish votes for a majority, and that simply didn't happen. This is never going to happen. This is dead for generations, isn't it?
At a domestic political level, yes. At a European level, no. And the reason I say that, because if you the devolution of Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland was not a British idea.
No.
The UK forms 12 European regions, of which is, if I go down, there's 9 English ones, including London, the North West, the North East, Yorkshire, Humber, East Anglia, West Midlands, East Midlands, South West, South East and London. They're the 9 English regions. And you can argue that they don't really mean anything because they're just a region. There's no historical reason to lump them together. But Scotland has an identity. Wales has an identity. Northern Ireland can be separated out, even though it sees itself as British. It can be separated out because of geography and its location with the island of Ireland. So the EU funded the separatist movements through the 70s and through the 80s. And you see that rise in Scottish nationalism with the SNP because it was funded. Unlike UKIP, for example, or Reform, they have to find money. The candidates have to pay away. With the SNP and Plaid, they had funding from abroad, which is illegal. And that funding came via the Home Office. And it was hidden under the guise of the Welsh language on one level and Scottish politics on another level. And so and there was no enthusiasm. If you remember back to the Scottish referendum, they voted for a Scottish Parliament, and that was quite a clear vote. But in Wales, they had to find a bag of 500 votes in Carmarthen to get over the line, because the Welsh didn't vote for independence or for Welsh Parliament. So all of those sort of factors come into it. So yes, at one level, you're right, but at a European level, then the SNP can recover, Plaid can recover. There's no enthusiasm for Plaid in Wales, really. It's growing with 8 seats, but it's not really, it doesn't have the clout or the attraction that Scottish independence does.
But really, Scottish independence only really, as I say, that's, we've said before, that's a weapon EU push, isn't it? Because yes. we were doing Brexit.
It's about breaking up the UK.
Yes.
The United Kingdom is a powerful economy, or it was. It was a powerful military, or it was. It was a powerful political body, or it was. So what do you do with powerful things? You break them up.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Let's talk about some great news. I think it's great news. Jeremy Corbyn having been booted out of the Labour Party by the pro-Israel lobby, and he then stood in Islington. He got a majority of over 7,000 votes as he beat the Labour candidate in second place, and he's now a lone voice as an independent in the Houses of Parliament. That's a good thing, Lee, isn't it?
Yes, independents are always good. I also think Jeremy Corbyn will be a thorn in the side of Starmer. Having had Starmer in his shadow cabinet to be stabbed in the back by Starmer and then thrown out of the party by Starmer and his acolytes, then yes, there's a whole
going to be jolly
agenda there. There's a whole chapter in this book there for the next 5 years.
The next 5 years is going to be quite interesting because, of course, we'll have Farage as well, and we saw what he was like in the EU. He never let anything go, did he?
No, he didn't. And so we've got the voices. We've got a good balancing left-wing voice with Corbyn, and we've got a good balancing right-wing voice with Farage. The problem is this 210 it's gone up to now, majority.
Yeah.
210. Starmer now doesn't even have to listen to his own side.
No, he doesn't. And he's going to be full tilt ahead. What did you make of Starmer losing 7,000 votes in his own constituency? His votes went down by 7,000 because a guy stood against him on his position on Gaza, because he is Israel through and through, backs Israel. He'll give them more money. This is more wars, isn't it? Ukraine, China, he'll go along with anything he's told, and so will David Lammy. God forbid he's going to become the defence. He's going to become the
Foreign Secretary.
Foreign Secretary. David Lammy, the most racist against whites you can. But if you remember back to the BLM, just go and have a look at some of the comments he made. He's going to be all for immigration. He's going to be all for war. This is a dreadful, dreadful day when David Lammy gets a position in the government.
210 seat majority, Labour government. It doesn't need to be David Lammy. It's going. Business owners must be running for the hills already. They must be looking to how do they shut their businesses down and take the cash out.
I've had two people text me very late into the night and went, "I'm off," meaning that they're packing up and leaving the country. That's not an idle threat, Lee. They're going to do that.
If you can sell your house,
yes,
then yeah. But how are you going to sell your house in an economy that they're going to tank, and they're going to do it in 12 months? The economy's not strong already.
Well, one of them actually turned around and said that I will take whatever offer on the house. He said, because he said this is, he disagrees with you. He turned around and said, this is a mandate now. He said, even if they perform badly, they're probably just going to scrape through the next election with, a majority. And he turned around and he said, but really, 200-seat majority, last time Conservatives had that, they had a mandate for 10 years. Because literally, even though they performed really badly and didn't do too much in the first 5 years, they were able to scrape by for another 5.
Traditionally, I agree. I think the political cycle is different now. This is what I was trying to explain earlier.
I'm just a bit thick.
But I think that this political cycle, look at Biden. Biden, if he'd won that, I know he didn't, I think there's questions to ask about who counted these votes. Because a 200-plus seat majority is not common. It doesn't happen often. And this is an election that there is no enthusiasm for with the public. It's a
massive turnaround, isn't it?
It's a record low turnout almost. And suddenly the Labour Party gets 400 seats. And Davos. And look what they did with Biden and Trump. I think there's questions to ask about who counted this vote.
There certainly is. Yeah, I totally agree with you, mate.
And that's why I think that as much as it's a huge win, and ordinarily you would see that fall away over a 10-year period. Yes, I agree historically, but I think this is going to be so bad. I think it would, just as they've destroyed the Conservative Party, I think they're about to destroy the Labour Party. Yeah. And after all, if with Yuval Noah Harari's AI, we won't need parties anymore.
Yes. Candidates, let's talk the disastrous Workers' Party of Great Britain performance. George Galloway beaten by about 1,500 votes in Rochdale. The Workers' Party of Great Britain didn't manage to secure one seat. They fought mainly in London. Nadia Klopp did well. She got about 3,000 votes, bless her, with James Rossi helping her on there. Them axing all the candidates all around the country to concentrate on London, then performing so badly in London and Galloway losing his seat. The people doing this, that were running this and getting rid of good candidates just because they spoke out against Israel. Didn't they get what they deserved, Lee?
Yes. As I predicted, I said they wouldn't get anywhere. We've interviewed their deputy leader, who, in my opinion, was a clear communist. How he was ever allowed to be a British ambassador, I have no idea. And, well, I do have an idea, actually, because it's all about the total destruction of the West, as I keep trying to tell people. Well, now we've got it. This is going to be worse. Oh, the other thing Starmer's going to do, he's going to sign us back up to the EU on again, catastrophic terms, because there's no way they will allow the UK back in with the number of votes we previously had in the chamber to be that balancing member, and so you can see that coming. I think it will take 5 years. I think it'll be one of those things they do in 2029 to completely destroy the next government, because I don't believe 210 seats will keep them in power for a second term. I think they're going to be so bad. I think the economy is going to tank. I think the only way they get a second term is if they bring immigration onto Superdrive and get them all on the electoral register. Like Biden's trying to do.
Staying with Galloway for a minute. We had James Rossi. We followed James Rossi, who was a candidate, and they dropped him for half an hour. We had them, with half an hour to go. We had Monty Panesar, the MP candidate for 2 days before he decided to go and find himself. We're going to fight in every constituency, and we ended up with only 150 Workers' Party of Great Britain. Great idea, badly thought out, bad strategy. Yes,
badly executed, I would say.
Okay.
They didn't have an organisation, so you can't run a national election campaign. We found this out in UKIP. Took us the best part of 10 years to build an infrastructure to run a candidate in every constituency. And it comes down to money as much as organisation.
Are they finished, or is this just the beginning?
No, they're finished.
Okay.
Just the fact that there's a question to be asked. I don't know the answer to this, but why did so many of their candidates, not the ones that were deselected by the party, but why did so many of their candidates walk away? It was either a complete shambles, or they were being dictated to, or they didn't really, once you got into policy making, they didn't agree with anything that was coming out of the top.
Well, the polls we got from the Westminster were fairly accurate until people started getting home and voting. A lot of the working people who went out and voted changed the political landscape a bit. Well, they changed it a fair bit, but some of the things that they were reporting came true. Galloway lost. Mordaunt lost as well. They didn't say that reform. So it's a lot of working stiffs went out and voted reform after 5 o'clock. They said that literally various people were going to be in trouble and their seats were going to collapse. That turned out to be completely true. They did forecast that Corbyn would also get back in, which turned out to be absolutely true. But it turns out that a lot of people who came home from work went out, voted Labour, Lib Dem and Reform and Conservatives and the Workers' Party of Great Britain and anybody else was just SNP was left out the door, weren't they?
Yes.
I have to talk about this because this is probably the saddest part of the whole.
There's one thing we haven't touched on. We've sort of jumped off the Conservatives before we got to their leadership going forward.
Yes, let's deal with the Conservative leadership. So we've lost Mordaunt, we've lost Chalk, we've lost Shapps, little Shapsy. Oh dear. I'm sorry, I can't find anything but joy in that the fact that Grant little Shapsy is no longer about.
Grant Shapps he's been a minister almost his entire last 20 years nearly, and he's failed in every job he's ever had. And he wanted to take us to war.
I can just see
the Liberal Democrats are up to 71, Warren.
Wow,
that's a recovery and a half.
I can just see. I suppose you'd have to say Liberal Democrats and Reform have done the best because Labour's share of the vote hasn't jumped through the roof.
Labour's share of the vote has dropped as the votes are still coming in, 33.9%. That's not a mandate.
No,
especially when you're talking about 50%-ish, just over 50% turnout. We'll get to an accurate number later, but to get 33, let's call it, be generous and call it 34%. Of a 55% turnout, that's not a mandate. That's less than 20% of the electorate.
I still can't help thinking of Shapps every time I see him. I just hear this. I just wait for somebody to come and pat him on the top of the head and go, "Yes, David." Like in the spitting image days of the 1980s when you had going in David Steele.
Talking about the leadership of the Conservative Party, there's no obvious candidate now.
Braverman, Cleverly,
which I don't think either of them are up to the job.
Tugendhat,
too left wing.
Yeah, okay.
I think which means there's going to be 5 years of infighting, certainly 2 or 3 years of infighting and factionalising the party whilst it tries to sort out its future, and that means picking the right leader. That is a massive opportunity for Reform and for Farage to be the voice of opposition even though they've only got 4 seats at the moment, to be the opposition in Westminster. So linking those two issues, I think there's a lot of Conservative voters that are going to be sorry they didn't go out and vote Reform when you see how many second places Reform have actually got and how close they were in some of those second places to actually winning.
Could have made a hell of it. We have to talk about this now, mate, because this is the saddest part of the whole night for me. Andrew Bridgen got annihilated in northwest Leicestershire. He's been the MP there for 14 years. He's done really well by the people in there. This is a horrible stab in the back. At least Corbyn in his constituency of Islington, the people there, stayed loyal to him. Is this a stab in the back by the people that he served so well? And that's the people of Leicestershire just turning around and saying, "We don't care. You can stick anything you like in our arms." That's basically what they're saying, isn't it? Or am I reading the room wrong?
No, I think you're reading the room correctly. I was just trying to pick my words before I answered.
I find let me say this so it might help you out. If you are one of those voters in North West Leicestershire who went out and voted Labour or Conservative, you had an MP there who was fighting hard not only for you, but for vaccine injured people, for the post office scandal people and everything else. And you are, in my opinion, an absolute disgrace because you got rid of the one decent person that served you for 14 years, the one decent person in the Parliament. And if you live in North West Leicestershire and you voted for somebody else, shame on you, Lee.
I think there's skullduggery afoot here. I think that to get 1,000 votes, I said it a little bit earlier, for this size of turnout, for Labour to have this size of majority, and yes, the Reform coming second so many places, Andrew Bridgen only getting 1,000 votes. I think somebody needs to look at who's counting these votes.
Labour, 16,000.
Especially after the 2015 election, where it was clearly people.
Yes, North West Leicestershire result. Labour, 16,000. Andrew Smith of Conservative, 15,000. Reform, 9,000. Green, 2,800. Alice Delamere of the Lib Dems, 1,600. Andrew Bridgen, 1,568. And Siobhan Dillon, 136. So the people of North West Leicestershire either hated Andrew Bridgen or they royally stabbed him in the back.
No, I don't think they stabbed him in the back. I think it's a solid Conservative seat. Half of them have gone and been loyal to their party when they should have been listening to what Bridgen was saying. I think Labour have just slipped through Labour have slipped through the gap here and just nicked it. I don't think it. I see no enthusiasm for this Labour Party. I see no enthusiasm for Starmer. I see no enthusiasm for the Labour Party. This is an election of omissions rather than commissions.
Andrew Bridgen being out of the Houses of Parliament, nothing is going to stop West Streeting now from signing up to the World Health Organization treaty.
Two different questions. One was about Bridgen and was he stabbed in the back? So no, I don't think he was stabbed in the back. I think there was skullduggery. I think the two main parties colluded together to make sure he was not re-elected. And that's where I go down we need somebody to just have a look at who counted these votes, not just in that constituency, but everywhere.
Did they just go on the doorstep and say anybody but Bridgen?
I don't know. I wasn't there, but I would imagine we knew and we predicted back in April when it was called, May when the election was called, or whenever it was. We basically said then and reported then that they would all move against him. They would all do everything they could to make sure he wasn't re-elected. Yes. That has now taken place. That's been But the second part of your question about vaccines, I think, yes, there is now no voice in Parliament that's going to ask, maybe Farage might, but there's no voice in Parliament that's going to ask about excess deaths. So as we run into the winter of 2024 and into the winter, spring of 2025, we're going to see the excess deaths go up and we're going to see nobody reporting it. We're going to see nobody talking about it.
And of course,
all covered up.
I was witness to the cover-up last night. I have to say that every single guest that was on, and there were a lot of MPs and a lot of ex-MPs, they avoided immigration like the plague. It could not have been more obvious that this was a deliberate tactic. And the moment the Reform candidate brought it up, that's a conversation for another time. And then what he did was he went on the attack saying, well, you had a racist candidate. And he turned around and said, look, if we find any racists in our movement, they're out the door. But he shut down the talk on immigration, which goes to prove, because nobody else was talking about it either, that goes to prove that this is absolutely an agenda, Lee.
It is absolutely an agenda. I've said it a million times. This is the United Nations agenda for the 21st century, which includes population replacement, migration, and 850 million migrants into Europe between the late 90s, mid 90s, and 2029, 2020, 2030. That's Agenda 2030. 550 million into the United States and North America, Canada, Australia, the US and Canada, 500 million. That is to repopulate, it's a deliberate attempt to change the demographic of Europe. It's a deliberate attempt to change the demographic of North America. The white people are the enemy. Look at EI. Try to get a job and look at, you're asked for your name and your details, you're asked for your CV, and then the rest of it is all DEI.
Yeah.
It's all what religion you are. Are you the same gender as when you were born? Do you identify as this? And religion, there's a million boxes you could tick for religion. And if you tick all the ones you are, you're not going to get a job.
I must admit, I've done this on various forums, and I know it really, really upsets them when they ask me, what ethnicity I am. I just put, it shouldn't matter, either I'm the best man or I'm not. The other thing that it is very, very troubling and very, very worrying. There's going to be a lot of people very, very happy. For instance, the US State Department, the World Economic Forum, the bankers, the globalists.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a globalist government. I mean, we're talking trans issues, we're talking LGBTQ in schools, we're talking immigration, we're talking tax. I mean, this is going to be horrific, isn't it, Lee?
Yeah. Whoever voted Labour is going to really regret it. And I think they're going to regret it really quickly. This is why I don't see that 210-seat majority being a 10-year mandate.
Yeah.
What they're going to do is going to be so catastrophic. It's going to make, relative to the country, it's going to make what Biden has done to the United States look like chicken feed.
This is going to, but my point on this is a get out of jail free card. Because for the first 5 years, they can go, oh, it was the Conservatives. Look at the mess we've had to tidy up.
This is going to be so visible. They're going to open the doors to immigration. Taxes will start going up almost immediately. Councils that have been constrained from increasing council tax by the Conservative government, by public opinion, are now not going to have to worry about the public opinion or the Conservatives, because they're gone and public opinion doesn't matter. So you're going to see, I think they've just missed this year. But you watch, by the end of the summer, they'll start talking about crisis in funding services, and council taxes are going to have to go up, and they're going to go up 6 and 9 and 10 and 15%. Probably, I think we'll add at least 50% to council tax between now and the next election, and probably more. And
obviously a green tax on businesses as well going up.
That the green taxes will go up, the levies on fuel will go up from 25% to, I believe they'll be, I don't think they'll touch 50% because there is an eye on public opinion, but I think we'll be well into the 40s percentages.
We basically have, in Keir Starmer, we basically got Mr. Vanilla, haven't we? He'll do absolutely anything that he's told to by his puppet masters.
Yes. He went to Davos in January
and supporting Israel,
and he proved that there. He sold his soul and he sold the country.
That includes supporting more wars, including Israel, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, yeah. We will back Israel to the hill, and I think now you'll. I'm not sure who the defense secretary is going to be, but. You can bet your bottom dollar they're going to be ramping up for war.
Yeah.
That's the agenda. That's what the United Nations want.
David Lammy talking to Marine Le Pen. How's that going to go?
Oh, fireworks, I would imagine.
Talking to Orban.
You're talking about, just brought France into the conversation there. They're already talking now about a deal being done between the left and the right, what they refer to as Les Bleus, to keep her out of office. And they're talking about this, she can't get an outright majority now. So their election's coming up, I think it's Monday, is it?
Yes.
The second round.
Monday, the 7th.
So they've already put the fix in to stop Le Pen, again, as I predicted they would. So having Labour with this scale of majority, France kept in its box and stopped from escaping. The EU, basically, the Commission now runs the EU. The Commission and the EU now run the countries. The country's got very little latitude to move. because of Brexit. Now Labour, the UK is back in its box and showing us to Europe. We've got Biden, and they're trying to make sure that Trump doesn't win. This is really this result in the UK signals the end of the West for me.
Yeah,
it's time to get out.
I think the UK they will absolutely finish off the UK, and we're grown up, so we disagree with each other without getting cancelled. That's going to come in as well, Lee. The freedom of speech under the Labour's restrictions that they want on that. And if you're not aware of the sort of things that the reform that Labour want to pass in terms of restricting your freedom of speech, go and have a look. It is horrifyingly scary. And they'll be back by the media because they're anointed, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. But the Conservatives passed that law, the online safety bill, which includes a lot of the stuff, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. So the Conservatives passed it, but haven't enforced it yet. This lot they're going to come after everybody, just as they have done in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. My thoughts, and we'll have a final summing up here. My thoughts, first of all, Workers' Party of Great Britain, George Galloway shot yourself in the foot. SNP, your referendum, this is just my personal thoughts. SNP, the chances of Scottish independence are further away than they've ever been in the last 15 years. Secondly, on top of that, Conservatives, you need to learn the lesson. Don't ever, until you split away and you stop being the second arse cheek of the same backside, then you're never going to get into power. Reform needs to keep up the good work and try and nullify the media's perception of them. And I wish that
will never happen.
No. Lib Dems, well done, Ed Davey, but please sort out your policies, because your green policy is absolutely terrible. Plaid Cymru, good luck to you. Finally, I'm going to talk about the individuals. Jeremy Corbyn, Nigel Farage, you're our only hopes at the moment. They've got rid of the one decent hope that we had in there, Andrew Bridgen. It's up to you to carry the fight to this bunch of lunatics who are going to ruin our lives. That's my own personal opinion. I'll leave the last word for you, Lee.
The end of the country. There will be not a lot left.
How soon?
I think it'll start relatively immediately. Within 6 months, you'll start to see the impact. I think by 2029, we'll either have Yuval Noah Harari's electronic AI elections telling us what we want, or I don't think there's going to be a lot left, Warren. We're going to be at war. We're going to have civil war. We're going to be flooded with immigration again. The economy is going to collapse. It's on its last legs already. And these people are going to tell us it's all our fault.
Yes. You can see it.
Because we both voted for him.
I'm staggered because I know that you do internal a lot, and I do war a lot. We sort of have our specialist areas. You do internal politics and British politics very well, and I do wars. David Lammy is going to be an absolute disaster if he is the foreign secretary. And remember that he doesn't mind. We've seen his tweets. He doesn't mind if white people die. So wars are all good for him. Very, very simply, I would just like to turn around and say, on what we consider to be a very dark day for Great Britain, the Conservatives were terrible. This lot are even worse. Please, Nigel Farage and Jeremy Corbyn, find some common ground together. I know you're on opposite ends of the spectrum, but find some common ground together and at least save us in the House of Commons by raising everybody's awareness. Lee?
There is no common ground between those two. It's a dark day in history, not just for the UK, because the UK, like the United States, was the outlier, keeping Europe under control or away from the DEFCON 5 button. This is not a good day.
In the words of one of our guys, we try to be as positive as possible, but there's nothing positive to be spoken about on this day apart from the fact that Farage is in there and Corbyn's in there, and it won't be dull. But hopefully their voices will be just that. They'll be just voices. Thank you ever so much for listening. But for the time being, we've run out of time. So it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from him. Bye.
Goodbye.